That's how it sounded yesterday. Matt Taylor, Rick Venturi, Colts Radio Network, as the Colts get a win in Foxborough, defeating New England 25-24, as you heard. And we have a loaded show today, not just because, obviously, it has been since the middle of last week that we joined you, but because a blank ton has happened in the world of sports since we last spoke. And, you know, obviously you have the bucket game with Indiana just absolutely, and this is how you know how bad things were for Purdue. And we'll get more into this over the course of the show because the Colts are going to be a big topic, obviously. But it's almost like Indiana football did one team within their campus a favor and then their biggest rival a favor. Because nobody was rooting when it was 4th and 8 and Indiana had a 59-0 lead and decided to go for it and put another touchdown on the board and go up 66-0. Not only was the Indiana basketball program elated because it made us forget about the fact that they had absolutely gotten run not once but twice and looked completely clueless down in the Bahamas. Yeah, I mean, I know they beat Providence. Yeah, good job. They looked absolutely clueless against Gonzaga and Louisville. And so that shifted things away from that. Ironically enough, I feel like the success of Curt Cignetti might be putting heat on Mike Woodson. We'll get into that at another time. But when you are up 59-0 and you go for it on 4th down and you then go up 66-0, typically the other team would be crying about, posting about, I'm not saying Purdue, I'm saying any school, would be pointing out that it's unsportsmanlike and it's Bush League and it's pounding, you know, a nail that's already been driven in and it's over the top. But Purdue, I think, actually was as much in favor of that as Indiana. Purdue's like, get 70, please. Just do whatever it takes because make it absolutely no discussion that they've got to make a coaching change. And Indiana did him that favor because Purdue decided to move on from the Ryan Walters era, and they are now looking for somebody to lead their football program with Ryan Walters being ousted after year number 2. And then, of course, the capper to the weekend, the sports weekend. It was a fabulous weekend of state championships in high school football. Obviously, the tree lighting downtown. All of it. You guys all know because I've talked about how it's my favorite weekend of the year. The capper being yesterday, and it went down to the last drive of the game between the Colts and the Patriots. And something happened in that game that I made note of as I saw it. There were, I believe, Jimmy Cook, just under 8 minutes remaining when Anthony Richardson threw an interception, correct?
That is accurate, yes.
And he threw that interception, and when he threw it, for a split second, it looked as if it was like, wait a minute, you know, was that a pick? What happened kind of was your initial thought. And they showed Anthony Richardson, and it was a long, isolated shot of Anthony Richardson. And you could see through the visor, the plastic barricade over his eyes, and you could see him just kind of staring. And I thought to myself, okay, what I'm looking at right here is a potentially, I'm not saying career-changing. I'm not going to be that dramatic. But at least temporarily, maybe season trajectory-defining epiphany that this guy's going through. And I don't know which this is going to be. But I'm sitting here looking into the eyes of Anthony Richardson, who looks incredulous with that interception. And I was thinking to myself, and I almost, I basically made note of it. He is either sitting there thinking to himself, I can't crack the code. I don't know. I don't know. I'm being told that I'm overthrowing things, and then on this one, I try to take a touch off of it, and I underthrow it, and it's picked off, and I don't know what the answer is. he was either thinking that or he was thinking, I've had enough of this. When my team needs me to deliver, and if I am in a position in this game where I have a chance to deliver when it matters most, I'm going to see to it that I do it. And I didn't know which way he was thinking. Maybe he was actually thinking, wow, it's cold out here. But in my mind as I was watching it, I was pretty certain that it was one of those two things. And what we saw was either going to be a recovery from that moment that was going to be one that showed growth, or it was going to be one that showed justification as to the benching of Anthony Richardson and that he was still stuck in neutral with his growth. And then I thought back to, as I've mentioned before, when Andrew Luck was first drafted, and the real selling point of Andrew Luck was that when he was in college, like 80% of the time that he threw an interception, he scored a drive. He had a scoring drive the following possession. And he was, to quote Ted Lasso, a goldfish. And I thought, okay, it would be good if we see that kind of a reaction from Anthony Richardson. And the other thing I thought about was how quickly things have changed. And look, I will admit right here at 12:08 on this, the 2nd of December, 2024, I will admit where it is entirely possible where I was potentially wrong about this. When Anthony Richardson was benched, Jimmy, I did think that was the Colts deciding that they were moving on from Anthony Richardson. I really did think that. And I think a lot of people thought that. And I think there are people within the organization that felt that. And I think what happened was they had decided that they needed to see what the rest of their roster looked like with competent quarterback play. And so they went to Joe Flacco. And then I think what happened is they realized, whoa, this guy's gone. So if we're going to lose from bad quarterbacking play, we might as well do it with one that we can see if there's something there. And they went back to Richardson. I think a big reason why they went back to him is because Flacco gave them nothing. And
they didn't get the competence that they were looking for.
Right. And they couldn't sustain it, right?
You also had a bunch of, we discussed that ad nauseum, but just for the record, potential player involvement and locker room frustration
Correct.
With where things were and them not going back to Richardson.
And so they go back to Anthony Richardson, and then as much as we can talk about how Anthony Richardson grew from that benching, what we saw yesterday is it's not just Anthony Richardson that grew, it was their willingness to conform their offense towards him. And now, for the first time, I think you can say they are routinely putting in plays that suit Anthony Richardson. Not asking Anthony Richardson to suit them. They said, okay, fine, we'll suit you. And you're starting to see results from it. So I think that once they went back to him, they thought, if we're going to go back to him, we might as well see exactly what we have here with different areas that we have untapped. And they start going to the legs, and they start utilizing run plays. And that opens things up. We talked about that in the game against New York. And then now in this situation with New England, with the game on the line, and you need 2 points, and they say, you know what, we're just going to go for it. And they go for the 2-point conversion. And they get it. Because they are relying on, you heard Matt Taylor say it there. And that's what's interesting. If you were to ask a lot of people in a vacuum in Wednesday or on Friday, who is the Colts' best offensive player, I think a lot of people would tell you Jonathan Taylor. But in that moment, as you're watching it, you hear Matt Taylor say, give it to your best offensive player. Because during that drive and in the moments where they most needed him to, as you're watching it, that's your reaction because Anthony Richardson was. He was their best offensive weapon because Jonathan Taylor is kind of a one-trick pony. I think we've known that for a long time. But Richardson, in his ability to use his legs to win on that drive, to show the moxie, to be a goldfish, to not get overly caught up in the interception, which a younger player might have done and a younger Anthony Richardson might have done. But his ability to just say, okay, we're just going to go down there and I'm going to lead this drive and win the game. And they're going to call plays that benefit him. The second epiphany I had in watching that all happen, Jimmy, and this is the antithesis, and I'm not trying to be, because there's nothing that drives me more crazy than reactionary, like knee-jerk commentary from one game to the next where you're just constantly changing the script and the narrative based on that moment. But when you're talking about the evolution and the growth and the analysis of a young player, and that we have said is going to be a roller coaster ride, where there are going to be peaks and valleys and ups and downs and everything else, at times your assessment can change as well based on how he's playing. And this sounds crazy to say at this point, but we have seen in this market, we have seen with this franchise, we have seen in covering this team, times where a really great quarterback masked deficiencies elsewhere that you didn't realize were there until that quarterback went down and you put somebody else in and you went, oh my gosh, this is a disaster. The Manning neck injury is the first thing that comes to mind. When Manning got hurt, people thought, well, you bring in Kerry Collins, you'll be okay. And then Kerry Collins came out and you realized was actually mentally still sitting on his porch in Tennessee playing his guitar. But you realized as well, the team around had major deficiencies that Peyton Manning had masked for a couple of years because he was such a great player that they were not those deficiencies were camouflaged. You take Manning out, and then all of a sudden, everything takes on water. With Andrew Luck, and kudos for them to getting Matt Hasselbeck. Hasselbeck was a pretty darn good backup. And so you could sustain for a while there, probably a longer period of time. But you could still see it. When Luck wasn't in there, there were areas of deficiency. Jimmy, my question for you today is this. Am I crazy in saying not necessarily the overall every possession skill set of Anthony Richardson, but the unique nature of him on some plays that you can run for him and your reliance at times on him running the football and utilizing his legs to get you 4 to 6 yards when you need it on late third downs or fourth down plays, that they are, in fact, potentially even masking some areas where the Colts have fallen him short. Their offensive line yesterday looked pretty good, but it's been inconsistent. Their receiving play and their tight end play almost feel like they regress. But Richardson's ability to not have to rely on that because of his ability to run the football, my worry is that they're going to become too reliant on the legs and as a result neglect to address the areas they need to, which is their tight end room is terrible and their receivers are inconsistent.
So the first point being, is he masking things with his ability as a quarterback? My answer would be yes, not to the degree that you highlighted with Manning or Luck, or for football fans that, looking for more current references, look at the Bengals the last 2 seasons or 2 of the last 4 years when Burrow has been hampered, and look at where their roster has gone without a high-level quarterback. The Colts, there are plays, there are situations where you sub in Flacco for Richardson, and it's a worse product. That's part of the reason it was such an easy call for many for them to go back to Anthony Richardson in the first place, because Joe Flacco wasn't bringing anything to the table. In terms of yesterday, that final drive, which is coming off of, you mentioned it, the pick, they force a punt, and Anthony Richardson's going to get one more crack at this thing. This doesn't mean that he is, by any stretch, the finished product the Colts need him to be. It doesn't mean there's not going to be struggles for maybe the next season and a half. They have a 4th and 3 at their own 40. And they had multiple fourth downs they converted that kept this drive alive. But the first one in that stretch is a 4th and 3 from their own 40. He gets pressured. He's forced out of the pocket. And it's basically a one-on-one play in space where either he's going to have to make this man miss and go get the first down, or he's going to have to pull some magic out of his hat, a la Mahomes, a la Allen, a la whoever you want to mention. He's going to have to make a great play. And he throws crossbody, finds Mo Alley Cox wide open in the middle of the field. They convert that 4th down. The drive stays alive. And then he continued to make plays and leads them down what turns out to be a game-winning 19-play, 80-yard drive in 5.5 minutes. If you want to credit the benching, that's fine. If you want to credit growth, that's fine. If you want to undercut everything and say, oh, it's the Patriots, yeah, of course, anybody be able to go ahead and make that type of game-winning drive. I'm going to fight you on that because it's the National Football League, and that's not a play that Anthony Richardson of week 1 of this year makes. Does this wind up being something where we talk about stacking performances and he now has confidence down the stretch run? Maybe. But being able to see that in the NFL, not a preseason game, not some tape from Florida where he just happened to be healthy. See it in the National Football League on the road against a New England team that has nothing to lose, and you're going to not only convert multiple 4th downs, but your coach is going to have enough faith in you. The same coach that benched you weeks ago is going to have enough faith in you for a 2-point conversion with the season basically on the line to call your number and have you go make that play to have the go-ahead points. Jake, this isn't hyperbolic to say if things continue to trend well for Anthony Richardson, this will be one of those moments, one of those drives, and one of those games where you say it clicked for him. And I was there with you, with him staring off into space after that pick, where I think he thought he made the right read. Because so often it's an overthrow, or it's plant issues, or it's arm angle, and he tried to modify it a bit, and the route gets undercut because the ball's slightly underthrown. That could have been the end of the game. And a couple weeks ago, he probably lays down, and that's it. And God forbid, maybe he's asking out of a game again. That's not what happened. There was real growth and maturity on display on that drive, where I'm not saying you could run around as a Colts fan and celebrate and say, yes, we got him. Franchise quarterback locked in. But you can say, I saw real growth today in a game-winning drive that kept the season alive. And that is big. That's the whole thing we've been selling all year is real-world experience for him and real reps that matter. That mattered yesterday. Will it matter moving forward? He's got to continue to grow. But to see that, that's what the whole season was about, is a moment like that for this quarterback with lack of starts, lack of reps, his team actively letting him down with how many drops you had yet again yesterday. The defense being unable to stop a Drake May offense that, in their own right, is still trying to find their footing. For him to overcome all of that and have a signature drive to keep the season alive is the whole reason you want him starting right now so you can figure out whatever he is. And yesterday, not always, but when you needed it most, he was great.
Now, in defense of Anthony Richardson, this kind of saying the right thing answer, I don't think was ever necessarily a problem with him. So I don't know that we can definitively say that the benching or that what he said here is a sign of growth. But I want to play for you what Anthony Richardson had to say yesterday about the drops, because there were drops. I thought A.D. Mitchell, even though it was well defended, had one. Kylan Granson at this point. I mean, what are we doing here, right?
That whole tight end room.
What are we doing?
But yes, especially Granson.
I mean,
Jake, there's no way they can look at that room, look at each game, and tell themselves, like, even as all I mock Ballard for, you can't look at that room and say you're doing your quarterback a favor by running it back with him.
We got 6 guys that are good football players. I mean, they might not be stars, but we got 6 that are real good football players in that room. Okay. If you got 5 tight ends, you got none, right?
Yeah.
But Richardson was asked yesterday about the drop passes when there were times he put the ball right where it needed to be and was not getting a completion out of it. And listen to what he had to say, because I think there was something interesting here.
In the moment, you may think that it's tough, but, you got another play after that to make it work. I don't throw a great pass every chance. There's definitely a few passes that I missed out there today. But it is what it is. Our guys know that they're supposed to catch the ball in that moment, and I'm pretty sure they're being hard on themselves right now. So, yes, it's up to me to let them know that they got to catch the ball, but I'm pretty sure they're beating themselves up already. So I got to be that piece for them.
See, I think that there is an element there. That's the right thing to say, right? The recognition of, look, I'm not perfect either. I need to make them aware of it. Yeah, I got to have you there, but at the same time, I'm aware of the fact that it's just as easy for them to come back and go, hey man, what about 3 plays before that when it was 9 feet over my head? Or what about, last week when you sailed it into the end zone and completed a pass there? Where were you then?
If you're looking for a comparison of Wyatt's maturity, of Wyatt's growth, and I know I throw this out there at times because it is my favorite team and the second team I watch most other than the Colts. Last year, Kansas City led the league in drops. And all the time, because we do this in the media, you're trying to get the golden soundbite, right? The good nugget that sometimes it's gotcha journalism, but sometimes it's just, oh, I want that because that made a catchy headline. They led the league in drops, and every week they'd ask Mahomes, hey, trying to set him up to either throw receivers under the bus. And there'd be days where it was like what happened to Richardson yesterday, where 10 guys wide open in space in the hands, and they drop it. And he wouldn't do it. He would say, it's on me. I got to make a better pass. I got to be better in the connection with them. We'll get better. We'll be fine. That's what you want out of a quarterback. Jake, I'm with you. I don't know how much I'm saying it's full growth, but it is mature as the face of the franchise, or supposed to be face of the franchise at 22 years old, to be acting that way, to say, hey, they're probably beating themselves up, but I need to be better too.
The Colts have put themselves in position to be in position now, and that's what you want, right? And most importantly, they get Christmas a little bit early. Have you started your shopping, Jimmy?
I have. Have you?
I have. And by the way, I want to remind everybody, when it comes to the holidays, and you'll hear me talk a lot about this between now and the 17th, which would be the deadline for it, but Firefly, which is the Children's Bureau, formerly known as the Children's Bureau of Indianapolis, still accepting if you would like to donate and sponsor a child or a family for the holidays. I adopted a family, for example. The girl wanted socks and underwear. I mean, really? Wanted socks and underwear. So I spent the better part of my weekend actually shopping for that. I told all my family, I'm like, everybody's getting one gift, because this little girl wanted socks and underwear. And so I did shopping for that, and I love it. And I will let everybody know how you can sign up to sponsor a child or a family. It's the pinned account on my Twitter account, @JakeQuery. As I always say, if you would like to text me as well, most people have my number by now, I will send you the link where you can look over and sponsor a child. But yes, I've done that, and then
if
started
I can
doing
add one nugget
shopping
to that,
as well.
Because Firefly is a great organization. Wherever you choose to do that at,
Correct.
Everybody goes towards, the little babies and the newborns. Like, that's generally what is attracted to.
I did.
But
yes.
For teenagers out there,
Yep.
like, everybody needs a gift. Like, I can't imagine being in that situation, but if you are, that 7 to 17 range, don't forget about them too.
Excellent point, because I also did a boy that's 14. He's a fan of the San Francisco 49ers, and he's getting like half of the Bay Area sent to him.
That's
right?
awesome.
But anyway, yeah, so for the Colts, though, they got the ultimate Christmas gift. And I'll tell you what that is. And by the way, a great stocking stuffer is to get, of course, any sort of a car wash program for anybody in your family. If you are a member of a monthly car wash program, now until the end of the year, you're going to get $20 off a signature service oil change from Jiffy Lube and a free tire rotation simply by showing them you care about the outside of your car. Go to any Central Indiana Jiffy Lube between now and the end of the year. Point to that sticker right there on your windshield or on your license plate, and the Jiffy Lube team member will do the rest. They will make sure that you are hooked up, as the kids say, and they will get you taken care of with that $20 off a signature service oil change and a free tire rotation at Jiffy Lube, your one stop for all your maintenance needs where you never need an appointment. Christmas came early for the Colts, and I mean more than just the win. I'll explain next. Disclaimer here that just because I mentioned that Christmas has come for the Colts, I did not give permission for Corbin to Mariah us. As a matter of fact, Corbin, who's filling in capably today for Eddie Garrison, not only does Corbin get disciplined for playing that, but Eddie will vicariously as well.
Seems fair.
It's a buy one, get one for the punishment of playing. Thankfully, Corbin, and thank you for potting that down before we truly got into it. Although, I will confess this, I actually don't hate that song.
It's a great song.
And same with the Paul McCartney, Simply Having a Wonderful Christmas Time. I actually kind of like that song. I like all the Christmas songs because it gets me. I love this time of year. And for the Colts, they should love this time of year right now for this reason. It's hard to imagine. You know, I did my Twitter, each week I've done it, where I ask people to define for me in 3 words or less how they would describe the Colts season to this point. And the vast majority of answers were exactly what you would think. Roller coaster ride. Somebody says better than expected. Richardson starting to improve. That's 4 words, but yes. Bipolar roller coaster. Erratic but building. Really don't know. Progress, period. Fire Ballard. Still playoff bound. That's a big one. Okay? My buddy Tyrone Shelton, who I always say looks like the friendly guy at the party, points out that the Colts are the only team in the league. Is this true? 13 games so far this year, and they have not given up an opening drive touchdown. Is that right?
I think that's right. I recall seeing that stat the last couple weeks.
That's the one thing you can hang the hat on defensively. But here's where, with all of that, with the inconsistency, with the defense yesterday at times being completely perplexing, Drake May looking completely comfortable. At one time, they were running a prevent defense way before they needed to, and New England was like, oh, okay, cool. We'll just take advantage of that. There were definitely areas of question. But this is the gift, the AFC, that keeps on giving for the Colts. The Colts at 6-7, still hanging around and right there within sniffing distance of the playoffs, with basically control of their own destiny by going into Denver with their next game and taking on the Broncos, who at 7-5, you've got a chance to obviously go in and put yourself in position where you surpass Denver within the playoff race, right? Denver playing, obviously, tonight against Cleveland. If Cleveland beats Denver, then you go in there, you got a major chance to make some headway. And this is the biggest gift of all. They've got more than a week to prepare for it. And I don't mean that because Denver has some sort of elusive scheme where you've got to come up with all kinds of different things in the lab to be different and defeat this stout, enigmatic, perplexing Denver game plan. But more so, even though the Colts at this point are pretty healthy, you just need a complete relax and reset. Why does anybody go on vacation? You'd like to think it's because you want to get a little sun. You'd like to think it's because it's cool to like be able to have a beer at lunch on Wednesday and not worry about it. You'd like to think it's because you like to see nice museums and cool places that you've never seen before. But the biggest advantage of going on a vacation is not even the going out of town. It's clearing your head and just getting away from the things that you're having to go through each and every week, and having a week where you just completely do a Control-Alt-Delete reset. And to a great extent, that's what happens in the NFL when you get your bye. You do the physical version of that. You just sit back and you let your body heal up. And the Colts seemingly win this lottery every year. What better time to have a bye than late in the year when you've limped your way to this point, but you know that you're going to have to get ready for a dash to the finish. And for the Colts, the schedule is very favorable for them to begin with. So Christmas came early for Indianapolis, not only because of the fact that their schedule really eases up after this game with Denver, but in addition to that, having the week to set yourself up for it by basically saying to guys, presumably, okay, guys, Get a lot of rest. Get a massage or two. Get feeling better, but just clear your head so that when we come back in a week, we can focus on the task at hand, which is the push down the stretch. And it is much better and much more advantageous to be entering into that final push than it is to be limping because you had your reset a month and a half ago.
Yeah, you never know where that draw is going to put your bye week, but for the Colts to have it in this position, it's as good as you could have drawn it up given the circumstances. Let's say, as we outline this picture for the sake of argument, that it is Denver winning tonight, so they're 8-5, Colts at 6-7. You need Denver to lose twice over the stretch run, and you can hand them one of those losses, which would then in turn give you the tiebreak. Colts win when they play Denver. They're 7-7. The Broncos in this simulation I'm making are 8-6. They play the rest of the way after that. The Chargers, playoff team. The Bengals, man, I thought they were going to be a playoff team. The Chiefs.
Have you finally waved the flag? Okay.
I waved the flag yesterday after the loss to Pittsburgh. No amount of Joe Burrow magic is saving the Bengals. It's over, regrettably, and I'll take the L there. But again, Broncos need one loss for the Colts to have a tiebreak and get in after they meet up on the 15th. They play the Chargers on the road. They play the Bengals on the road. They play the Chiefs at home. For the Colts, Titans at home, Giants on the road, Jaguars at home. I know with this defense and the way that the Colts offensively are sometimes dropping passes, you could argue there's no easy game for them. That is a far more palatable schedule to close than what Denver has, despite everything, despite the benching, despite the controversy at quarterback, despite Richardson trying to grow as the season plays out. You literally still have everything in front of you if you go in and beat Denver. Because if Denver wins out with that stretch run, sure, you'll look back if you're a Colts fan and look at some of the missed opportunities down the stretch, but you tip your cap to Denver at that point. Because that will have meant that Bo Nix really had an incredible rookie season, that Broncos defense is as good as advertised, and they survived the Chargers, the Bengals, and the Chiefs without dropping a game. At that point, you just tip your cap.
You've seen Baker Mayfield play, right?
I have.
Baker Mayfield's kind of found like the fountain of youth. Not really, because he's not old, but he's kind of been reborn, right? With a new stop in Tampa, and looks like a guy that is he a Pro Bowl quarterback? I don't know about that, but he's not the level of incompetent that I think along his first stop when it went south, people thought he was, and so he's done a nice job. But he did do something that, in my opinion, he should be able to say he was basically the guy that owns that act, and anybody trying to replicate it, it's grown tired. And I don't want to be an old guy, but I'm going to be an old guy by throwing my arms up in the air and airing grievances. Even though it's the holiday season and it's not yet Festivus, I have a few grievances to air about the game of football, and it's not on the professional side. And Baker Mayfield is associated with it. And it does actually tie into Central Indiana as well. Mike Chappell going to join us. I'll tell you that next, and then Chappell's going to join us in 19. I think we have a natural tendency, Jimmy, to feel that when life is cyclical, right? Fashion ultimately always recycles itself, except for the polyester leisure suits. I don't think those will ever come back. And parachute pants. Those are the two things that I don't think we'll ever see again. But, like bell bottoms came back for a while there. There's denim stuff. Denim kind of never goes away, but you get what I'm saying, right? Music, a lot of times with music, what's old becomes new again based on a movie or something that will come out, and then all of a sudden Queen, young people are all listening to it, or the Doors or whatever. But you have a natural tendency when you see something that is a replication of a previous thing to become the old guy that's like, well, back when we did it better. That kind of thing, right?
Yes.
But let me tell you two things that now have become completely played. Because they were done, and when they were done originally, they were unique and like, holy cow, and then just let that be owned, and now it's over the top. The first, which is not the primary source of my angst, but the first is the player doing the Heisman pose. First off, none of them correctly do the Heisman pose. But Desmond Howard did it, and when Desmond Howard did it, it was like, oh my gosh, did that guy just pose like the Heisman? And then he won the Heisman. Mic drop, right?
Yeah.
Don't try grabbing the mic from him. When you do it, to this day, at this point, anybody that does it isn't doing it because they think they're going to win the Heisman. They're doing it because Desmond Howard did it, and he's on game day, right? So you're actually just acknowledging, I guess, there's some level to that that's kind of cool, like paying tribute. But that's not why you're trying to do it. You're trying to do it to say, I'm going to win the Heisman. And it's like, no, actually what you're doing is everybody knows who is the origin of this. So I just think it's kind of played. But whatever. The other one is this. Arizona and Arizona State. North Carolina and I believe it was North Carolina State.
Yep.
Certainly Ohio State and Michigan. And there was another one, too, that I can't remember where I saw it this weekend. But when Baker Mayfield was with Oklahoma, and Oklahoma went and won at Ohio State, and he went out to the middle of the field and planted the flag, it was literally like, what did that guy just do? And it was completely on par with kind of the bravado that Baker Mayfield had as a player. But nobody really had ever seen it. And then all of a sudden, and years have passed since then, and I don't know why this became this weekend that it became the thing. But seemingly every time you turned around on Saturday, there was a different fight or pushing and shoving or brawl going on in the middle of a field because somebody was going out and planting a flag and dancing at the midfield and whatever else. I don't have a problem per se with doing it as much as it's just the fact of like, it's been done before. Why did this? It's kind of like Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A's been around for 35 years, and then all of a sudden, like 10 years ago, it just overnight became a place where you're driving on Keystone, and you're like, why is traffic backed up?
Got to get a number one.
And you're like, oh, wait a minute, because there's two lanes that are trying to turn into Chick-fil-A. I love Chick-fil-A, but I don't know what happened where Chick-fil-A overnight became this always busy, looks like Buc-ee's from outside level place when it's been around forever. And it's kind of true with the flag planting. Like, this has been done before, and then there was apparently this dormancy where nobody did it, and now everybody's doing it, and it just looks boorish, and it looks played out. Not even necessarily the act, but the reaction to it. I think the reaction to it is so lame. Ohio State, I'm sorry. You got your ass kicked. Yeah, okay, you only lost by 3. But you did it to your arch rival, who's now beaten you 4 times in a row, who's unranked, who's had a down year, and after you jumped up and down and complained to anybody that would listen that the only reason they beat you before is because they had a guy on the sideline stealing your signs. And now they come into your place and they beat you. And I'm sorry, like if you want to have an over-the-top testosterone-induced temper tantrum and push people around to the point where you got to get pepper spray to like get the other team off your field, then you should have beat them, right?
1,000%. Yeah, I mean, it was incredulous that Gus Johnson is on national. I love Gus, by the way. Like I am team over the top. I know we played that call. Like I'm all for it, right? But defending Ohio State because you want to say Michigan started it by planting the flag at midfield is lunacy. The other thing, last thing I want to add, the first time I ever remember seeing a flag planted for me, Michigan State did it to Notre Dame back in 2005, and I had to double check to make sure I was right that actually happened. They ran at midfield, they planted. I don't know who planted it. I just remember they put the big Spartan ass in the middle of the field. It's like, oh, okay, this is the ultimate in bragging rights now when you're a road team and you go and win. Baker popularized it as being an individual
you're right.
to
I
do
mean,
it.
Baker Mayfield's the first one that, as an individual, it jumped out, right?
I agree with half of your tweet from the weekend, which is once it's done once on big noon kickoff, and maybe they didn't know. I have a hard time believing Arizona State, as much as people are on social media, didn't hear about what happened in the Michigan-Ohio State game. Once it's done the first time that day, okay, cool. Like by the third flag plant, I'm like, okay, I've had enough today. Thank you.
We'll get into this. I'm good. We'll get into more of this later. But I feel like, and maybe I could be wrong, but I feel like I've never been a big fan of Gus Johnson. Because more often than not, he sounds ill-prepared. He's way over the top. And as I've always said, and I'm not by any stretch of the imagination saying that I'm in the level of Gus Johnson. I mean, don't misunderstand me.
Sure.
But I've always said, in calling the Indy 500, the one thing that I had to learn is that, and it took me a while to learn this, a pass for the lead on lap 80 is different than a pass for the lead on lap 180.
Yeah. Yes.
And when Gus Johnson loses his mind in the second quarter of a play, it's after a while. I think that he was, when he first started doing it, people loved it because he was so different. But now he is getting caught up in chasing his own standard, by which he is no longer an anomaly, but like he's a caricature of himself. And I think it's wearing people out. I could be wrong on that. We'll get into that. But where this all ties in with Indiana is this. Indiana and Purdue, huge rivalry game. Now, granted, it was in Bloomington, right?
Yes.
So Indiana, by beating Purdue, can't go and plant a flag in the middle of the field because they're at home. So they did one better. Indiana did the ultimate to their rival. And that is actually earned a tip of the cap from the fan base of their rival by not only being up by 59 with 4th and 8, but going for it, scoring on that drive, pushing it to 66-0, leaving the pedal to the metal, and completely humiliating their rival to the point where there's no choice but to fire the coach, even though it appears as though he was fired like 2 weeks before that. But the ultimate, rub the face in it from a rival standpoint is not even to plant a flag, not even to start a fight, but to actually gain the respect of the rival fan base because you beat them so bad, you put them out of their misery and force them to change complete trajectory direction of their program. Danny Pinter next, is that right? So we have a show adjustment here. Danny Pinter of the Colts, admirably filling in yesterday at the center position, going to join us next. That moves Mike Chappell to 2 o'clock, it appears. So Danny Pinter, who yesterday, that line played well, and we'll get his insight on it next. Cardinals of Ball State proudly represented yesterday with Danny Pinter. He's been, of course, a veteran now with the Colts, but has been a real Swiss Army knife for them. And yesterday, going back to a position that he has played before for the Colts, but it's been a while, filling in admirably at the center position. I thought the offensive line yesterday was really good, considering it was makeshift is the wrong word, but not a group that is used to playing with one another. Joining us now on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line is, in fact, Danny Pinter, who yesterday helped the Colts get that win in New England. Danny, first off, happy holidays to you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, same to you. I appreciate you.
Hey, I'm going to begin with this. You know, you're a guy that collegiately you were a tackle. Obviously, at the professional level, you've kind of had to play. You've been really a versatile offensive lineman for the Colts that's been able to go in different areas. Which is the hardest one to go to transition? Is it harder to go from, say, a tackle position and then have to play center? Or is it harder for a natural center to then have to go and play a different area of the line?
Yeah, I think it would just vary on guy to guy. I mean, obviously, you know, there's different requirements at each position, different tasks you have. And I think center, there's obviously a lot more that the mental aspect of it too. So yeah, I think it just varies on guy to guy. You know, you see guys all across the league, you know, moving around to different positions.
I thought you guys got really good play, in particular, Danny, to the right of you. You know, on your left yesterday, you've got two guys that we're used to seeing in Quentin Nelson and Bernard Ryman, obviously. I mean, but on the right side, you have, you know, Glowinski, for example, I thought was really played well, considering the fact that he was the late acquisition that 3 weeks ago wasn't even necessarily a part of it. You know, guys like Anthony Costanzo have told me so much about familiarity and how important that is to an offensive line with the cohesiveness of understanding motion of the guys aside from you. How big a learning curve was it, even though those are guys you're familiar with, yesterday, and how far into the game was it before you really found rhythm, if you will?
Yeah, man, I think, you know, we had a really good week of practice leading up to it. And, you know, obviously Glow's been here. You know, we've played games with Glow, and you know, Matty Gons has stepped in and done a great job at multiple positions this year. And so I think, like you said, it's really just about the cohesiveness of the group, which is something we always stress. You know, going back to the spring, we say it doesn't matter what we do if we're not doing it all together. And I think, you know, when you have that attitude, it doesn't matter who steps in there at whatever position. You know, it's about doing it as a group. But, you know, definitely, I mean, it was awesome. The way Glow stepped up, the way Gon stepped up, you know, Bernie coming back off missing a couple of weeks. And, you know, obviously Q's always doing his thing. And, yeah, I think it's just all about playing as a group, and, you know, everyone stepped up and played together.
Danny, can you take me through, from your perspective, since, you know, we don't get to live in the trenches, we don't know what that's like. Can you take me through that final 19-play drive that winds up being the game winner, and most notably the physicality of the 2-point try to make enough space and give Richardson a chance to make that play at the end?
Yeah, man, I think, you know, that's really what it came down to. That whole game was pretty physical, and that was kind of the mindset we came into the game with, was just knowing that we had to play the game physical and didn't have to be perfect, but if we play physical, that takes care of a lot of stuff. And, yeah, I mean, that whole last drive, it was just kind of about a will to win. I think, you know, whoever was in, all 11 guys in that huddle, you could just kind of see in their eyes, you know, we're going to go get this thing done. And obviously, you know, Anthony was the one leading us. His confidence in the huddle was huge. And it's just kind of never a doubt. And it's just taking that thing a play at a time. And I don't think until after the drive was over, you really realize how long of a drive that was. But, you know, I think it was awesome, you know, AR leading us down there, and just every guy doing his role.
Danny, you've been in the locker room. Danny Pinter, our guest from the Colts, you've been in the huddle. You've been in the huddle with different quarterbacks, okay? So, and everybody's different. I guess I'm going to ask a two-part question. The first is, when you talk about the confidence of Anthony Richardson, some quarterbacks have a confidence because they're loose and they're relaxed and they crack a joke on a drive in the huddle. Some of them are confident because you can just tell that they're not nervous and they have a poise about them. You know, there are varying ways of leadership. Give me an example from yesterday of where Anthony Richardson to you showed leadership and confidence. How was it exuded?
Yeah, I think it's just the whole process of, you know, him getting the play in. You can just hear it in the way he's calling the play, the confidence in it. He knows it's assignment, knows everything that needs to happen. You know, pre-snap, knows what he's looking for in the defense, which comes through all your prep throughout the week, which, he's been all over that, which has been awesome. Look at those, fourth down runs. We put the ball in his hands there. We put the ball in his hands for a 2-point conversion. I think it's just something you can hear in his voice. And the way he's portraying the play, getting it out to us. And it's just a confidence that, definitely everyone feeds off of.
Would you say, so the second part of that question is it any different than Anthony Richardson of a year ago or, 7 weeks ago?
I think Anthony's always had the confidence, which has been fantastic. And I think he's had confidence through ups and downs. That hasn't wavered. And I think, guys are definitely feeding off of that. So from that aspect, no, I don't think his confidence is any different. I think, obviously he just continues to grow as a leader and as a playmaker and a guy. 2 of the last 3 weeks, he's led a game-winning drive. So I think it's continuing to grow, but I don't think his confidence has ever wavered. I think he's just, growing as a player with that, which has been awesome.
Is there a different mentality in blocking when you have a quarterback that can bail out a play with his legs? Now, I realize, Danny, that a lot of the plays now Shane Steichen is calling a design run, so before the snap that's what's going to happen, right? But because Anthony Richardson has the ability to tuck and just go, do you have to kind of have eyes in the back of your head of understanding the operating areas that you have to open up for him, because at any time it can suddenly become a run play?
I don't think your approach changes too much. Obviously, he's a good passer too. So you're trying to block for him to throw the ball if it's not a called run. But obviously that aspect of his game is just a great weapon to have. So I think, defensively, I'm sure when you're game planning him, it has to be all the different, assets he has. You have to be aware of all of those. And obviously, we've seen him make some unbelievable plays, extend some plays. So, yeah, as a lineman, obviously you love that. But I don't know that it changes your approach from the beginning, but he's obviously a weapon for us.
Colts offensive lineman Danny Pinter is our guest. Danny, if I have this right, that was your first offensive snaps in 2 years. I know that it's next man up mentality regardless of your position, but how does a lineman stay ready? Like, how do you continue to stay both mentally and physically ready for when your number's called?
Yeah, I think it's just a mix of things. I think it's, really, it's cliche, but truly the approach of just trying to get better every day, no matter what your role is, no matter where you're at. Last year I was injured last year, so it's a different way of finding a way to get better. But yeah, it's just trying to get better, trying to stay ready, care so much about this group. And we've had so many guys step up, and I think it's just because of that mentality of, the next man up better be ready to go. No one wants to let the group down. And, we've had so many guys step up, and I think it's just because, the cohesiveness we have in that room and how much we care about each other, you want to play for those guys.
Has that made it easier to battle through or respond as a group when the injuries have popped up, when there's been changes at different positions, when you've had changes along the offensive line and changes at quarterback this season? I imagine as tight-knit as that group is, communication is paramount. Has going through that adversity made it easier to some extent? Yeah,
absolutely. We just a level of care in our room for each other, just genuinely. A mix of that, we all hold each other accountable because we care about the group, we care about each other, and we just have such a good collection of guys that want to go do it for each other. So it doesn't matter who steps up. We know that guy's gonna be ready to roll.
Hey, Danny, did you get a chance to watch? I realize you guys are traveling back and you probably had family stuff and whatever else, but did you get to see any of last night's Buffalo-San Francisco game?
I did.
Okay.
That's a lineman's dream right there.
So, okay, now this is the thing. I really want to know this and be honest, because I realize that you're a lineman, right? You just had the highest, I don't know if you know this or not, but you had the highest blocking score from PFF yesterday in the game against the Colts, which I don't know if you get like a certificate for that or, how much you guys pay attention to it, but it's cool, right? But I look at that game last night and I think to myself, now that has to suck. Okay, to go out there in the snow and have to block and nobody's wearing sleeves and contact hurts more when it's cold. Deep down, that would suck, right?
I guess it just depends per person. I think, most linemen, that kind of felt like an old school game. I feel like, you're going to run the ball a bunch out in the elements, just going to war with the guys next to you out in the cold. It looked fun to me. It looked like those linemen were having fun.
Well, You know what it looked like? Let's be real. That looked like backyard growing up in South Bend, Indiana football, waiting before dinner time, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Those were good times.
So, honestly, though, that kind of I don't know, like it is true football. I get that, right? But the elements to me, it would be a challenge. It just seems like it would really be a challenge. So I'll give you a tip of the cap there if in fact it is not and you relish it. Danny Pinter, our guest. I want to go back to what Jimmy was talking about, and that is just that last drive of the game, Danny. Was there a point in that game yesterday where you realized if we get this ball back, we're going to be okay? Or even on that drive, was there a point where you could see a look in the eyes of Anthony Richardson that you knew this was going to be different?
Yeah, I mean, I think from the jump, at the start of that drive, we do like, hey, this is the opportunity. We got to capitalize on this thing. We didn't want to give the ball back to them. Let's make it happen. I think, like I said, I mean, it's hard to describe unless you're in that huddle, but just the confidence he protrudes right from the start of, all right, let's go get this thing done. I think, every guy in that huddle feels that and everyone feeds off of it. So, I mean, Anthony's an awesome guy. He's been an awesome leader for us, and we're definitely rallying around him.
Danny, did you watch Joey Sly's kick? I mean, from 68, I know sometimes for game-winning opportunities, players will look away or they'll put a towel on their head or whatever, but from that distance, you got to feel like, okay, he's going to need to be just otherworldly to knock that through. Came about a yard short. Walk me through that from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I watched. That was impressive. I definitely was holding my breath until that thing hit the ground and saw the officials wave. I mean, that was an impressive kick, and definitely that would have been heartbreaking. So glad that thing fell short.
It was. I'll tell you what. And I was stunned that I think everybody probably, Danny, was surprised when they threw that because it looked like they were in Hail Mary territory. And so when May completes that pass with 1 second left, the precision with which they ran that, and you thought, oh my gosh, they're really going to roll this guy out. Everybody's holding their breath, right? I want to know this. Coming off of that kick, you exhale, you're relieved, you get the win. And now you go into the bye knowing that Denver is going to be a big one. For you as an NFL player, Danny Pinter, is the bye week more important for the physical recuperation or the mental reset?
It can be both. But I think for sure physically, especially, this is definitely a later bye in the year. So I think that's, we're just trying to use this thing to our advantage of, let's get this thing healthy and, take this thing at a game at a time. We got 4 guaranteed left, and it's really just, every game's going to feel like a playoff game here. Got to get it done. So I think, guys are definitely going to use this to reset their bodies and, get ready for Denver. Like you said, it's going to be a big one. But yeah, the time off it's nice, but I don't think anyone's losing focus on what's ahead.
By the way, knowing the erratic nature of the weather in Denver, you might get a lineman's dream, just so you know, Danny. I mean, you never know, right? You might be playing in a blizzard in Denver. It might be 62. You never know. But what is the schedule for you guys? I mean, when you have a bye week, the fan thought is everybody, as soon as that game was over, is on their way to the Bahamas, and then you get together next week. Do you guys have team functions at all that you go through over the course of the week, though?
We get a fair amount of time off. It's definitely talk to your coaches and stuff today. I was in there this morning. A lot of guys were in there, but then you definitely get a little time to get away, and everyone uses that how they might. Whatever guys need to do. But I think we're especially being late in the season. You're so locked into your season, your routine right now that everyone's going to use this to reset their bodies a little bit, but everyone's ready to get back here and keep working.
Is there an advantageous or perfect time for the bye week? If they came to the players and said you can pick it at in August, if they came to you and said you get to pick when the bye week's going to happen, is there one time of the year versus others that's preferred?
I don't really know. I can't say I've experienced many varieties of them, so it's hard to say. I mean, I think right in the middle might be decent timing, but it is what it is. It's out of our control. So whatever it is, take advantage of it when it comes, and just go from there.
Okay, how much did you get to follow? I know it's difficult because you got a job to do, right? How much did you follow Ball State football over the course of the year?
I'm always following Ball State football. Obviously that was disappointing for Coach New. I love that guy. Everything he's done for Ball State. and for me, I wouldn't be where I am without Coach New and all those coaches on that staff. So that was definitely disappointing for me. But no, I'm always following them. I'm always staying in touch with the coaches. Obviously, I have a lot of pride in Ball State.
Here's the thing, Danny. That the league itself in the MAC, I like Mike New a great deal as well, right? And that league is just, there's so much, and I think this is what's so intriguing and fun about the MAC. There's not a lot of difference between, say, like second in the MAC and ninth in the MAC. I mean, the parity of that league is such that it feels like with Mike New, and I get it, it comes down to your record, right? But it feels like at the same time that Ball State for the last couple of years has been like 5 plays away from being 4 games better than they are. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. I think you're right. I mean, every game in the MAC seems to be close, no matter who's playing each other. Anything can happen. And yeah, like you said, man, I appreciate everything Coach New's done. I think he did everything he could for that school, for the program, brought a MAC championship, and it was, all those games were super close. Could have gone anyway.
Do you have to? I don't know how much you stay in contact. I mean, obviously you're one of the more prominent alums playing in the NFL. Is your opinion sought in terms of the direction of the program, candidates, that kind of thing?
As in, do I have an opinion on who should be next or anything?
Exactly.
No, I don't. That's way above. They're not calling me asking for my opinion on that.
All right. Whoever it is, you'll support him. How's that, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
Danny, enjoy. Are you going to get a chance to take vacation now, or are you sticking around here?
I'll go up. My family's still here in Indiana, so I'll go up see my family, maybe get a little fishing in here, but nothing crazy for me.
All right. Well, we wish you the best of luck in fishing. Hopefully you have the same level of success you had yesterday, and I think it's very admirable. I mean, I know you're a professional. You want to play well anytime your number's called, but it doesn't mean always that it's the easiest thing to do, especially when it's a position that's not your primary. So to go in yesterday, to do what you did, the level of which you did it, and kind of anchor that line that I thought played really well, kudos to you for that. And I know Colts fans were happy with the result. We wish you the best of luck in the fishing and then in Denver as well.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys.
All right, Danny Pinter joining us on the Express Pro Tire and Autos guest line. I thought, again, Jimmy, that is not the easiest thing in the world to go in there. And I remember when I was doing the morning show with Kevin, and we would do our thing every year where we talked about most indispensable players, and I had mentioned Danny Pinter, and it was like, Danny Pinter, like, he's not even a mainstay. But when he went out with injury, I think you realize the value in a guy that can be that Swiss Army knife. I just have always loved guys that can play various positions and don't need necessarily like forefront attention to be able to play from one position to the next and fill in different roles. Charles Johnson's a guy from way back that was that way. I think with the offensive line, probably more than any other position in the league, versatility is such an important thing. I'd almost rather, or I shouldn't say rather, I would almost as much have a guy that is a 6.5 or a 7 at 3 different positions along the line than have a guy that's a 9 but can only play one of them.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
You're having more holes to plug at that point. You need consistency across the board. And to be honest, and you mentioned Kevin, but Kevin Bowen had a piece up on 1075thefan.com referencing this, that very easily could have been another rough day at the office for the Colts offensively, with the offensive line being who was to blame. We talked about the struggles in the passing game because of drops already, but focusing on the O-line, basically in terms of depth chart order, a third-string center playing his first offensive snap since 2022, since 2 years ago because of injury last year, a 32-year-old right guard in Glowinski who was on an NFL team this offseason. The Colts just pick him up off the street, and then a rookie right tackle getting his first snaps on that particular side of the line, mixed up with Ryman and others. It was a patchwork offensive line going into Foxborough. Again, the Patriots aren't some vaunted team by any stretch of the imagination. They've won 3 games, but you talk about needing to patch holes and having obvious weaknesses and trying to make life easier on Anthony Richardson. For that group, led by Danny Pinter, especially on that final drive, to do what they did, speaks volumes to versatility shining for the Colts in that game. And you needed every bit of it to be able to go. J.J. Stankovitz had mentioned this as well, Jake. Since 2001, it's the longest game-winning drive for the Colts since 2001, that 19-play drive. You just don't see drives like that in this league go that long and end in touchdowns. And for them to be able to do it, it wasn't just Anthony Richardson. It took a great day from an area of this team and the offensive line we've pointed at as weakness for the last couple of weeks. It was nice to see.
Yeah, I thought anytime that you talk to guys, they're going to say the right things about a teammate, right? But I think you could tell there with Danny Pinter, there was a belief in the growth of Anthony Richardson and the confidence
For
in
sure.
him. And confidence is exuded a couple of different ways. I mean, there's confidence that can be a fake confidence. I mean, we've all had it, right? Sometimes, David Letterman is the one that said that confidence sometimes can win over everything, and sometimes if you're not confident, faking it is good enough. But it can also be very transparent. And there have been times where you see players and they go out there and they walk the walk, but then when it comes to actually making the run, you're like, yeah, this guy's not going to deliver it, right? Everybody acts like they've got it. But I go back to, and I'm belaboring the point I realized, Jimmy, but yesterday when Richardson threw that interception, you could just see processing. You could see him processing that, okay, this drive came to an end, but I'm not going to let this hold me back. And there were times in the past where I think Richardson he underthrew that ball that was picked. But he didn't necessarily sulk over it. And in the past, I think there were times maybe where even he turned the page too quickly. I think he dwelled on it and wanted to absorb what happened, to just process it, to put it in and break it down so that it didn't happen again. And you saw the result on that last drive, because when they needed plays to be made, it was Anthony Richardson that was able to make them. Indiana, a resounding win in the bucket game. Don Fischer this guy made the smartest call of them all. The smartest call of them all, because instead of going to the Bahamas, he stayed and he said, hey, look, we got a football team, and I've got to do that as well because it's football season. And was not on the mic for Indiana's games against Louisville and Gonzaga, but was on the microphone for a historic win for Indiana. 11-1 now. They have, I think, absolutely secured themselves in the college football playoff. They blanked their rival. Don Fischer to talk all about it from the Indiana football standpoint next. presumably on their way to the college football playoff. I just don't see. I mean, at this point, it's a slam dunk, right, Jimmy? Because not only did Indiana do what they had to do by resoundingly winning the bucket game, and I know that Purdue obviously is at a historically low level for their program, but in addition to that, there was so much chaos that happened around them. It's not like everybody held serve. I mean, Indiana went out and pounded Purdue and then just kind of sat back and watched other teams that were in the same zip code falter.
Yeah, they got a ton of luck go their way last week. They took care of business this week, and more chaos ensued. I tweeted at the time based on where they were positioned when the rankings came out last Tuesday, and we'll await tomorrow's rankings. I think they're a lock. I think they're in. Now it just matters on seeding.
So the Hoosiers are 11-1, and for a team that was picked by those of us in the media, I was not one of those, let me just say, that voted on them to finish 17th in the Big Ten. I was not one of them. But they go from being predicted as 17th in the Big Ten to finishing 9th in the rankings in the country. Joining us now on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line, he is the radio voice of the Hoosiers, Don Fischer, who just thawed out about 20 minutes ago from that game. Because, Don, before we get to what happened on the field, that has to be one of the 10 coldest bucket games of all time, right?
Well, it was cold, I'll say that. I don't remember back. I mean, there are many bucket games that have been pretty cold because you're playing the last part of November. So, generally speaking, it's going to be a cold day, but it was cold. There's no question about that. The snow was coming down. We haven't really seen that on the field in a long time. So, yeah, it was a little bit unique.
And listen, it was obviously, it's interesting because Indiana, when I say that got off to a slow start, Don, I don't mean that in the literal sense as much as just comparatively to the rest of the game, because once they kind of got their groove, I mean, they never let off the accelerator. That's kind of been Curt Cignetti's MO. But I do think of that, maybe some of that's motivated by the fact it's a rivalry game, but the reality is, Don, you kind of had to be resounding in that because of the college football factor. Am I correct in saying that, of the fact of, look, not only does Indiana want to win this game, they want to make sure that they are emphatic in the fashion with which they win it to get that variation of differential of point going into the last ranking of the College Football Playoff Committee?
Well, there's no question, because the committee, Ward Manuel, who's from Michigan, and obviously their team's not involved in it, so that's a good thing. But Ward Manuel talked about the fact that there are style points involved here. And that obviously means, what have you done against the opponents that you played? And there's nobody in the country that can probably say they've done more against the opponents that they played this year than Indiana. They have dominated, with the exception of Ohio State and Michigan, they have dominated every other opponent that they played so far this season. So, yeah, the style points come into play there, and there's no doubt when you hear that from the head of the committee, you obviously think, well, we better put a number on the scoreboard that's going to impress them. So that's exactly what Indiana did.
Don, you talk about the style points and the resume and what they've been able to do. Everybody wants to point to teams stubbing their toe. Not only did Indiana not do that against lesser competition, they blew the doors off of basically everybody they played. If the playoff committee was to call up Don Fischer and ask you to make the case for Indiana, I think they're in. I think Jake thinks they're in. But if they were asked you to make one final case for why they're in the playoff, what would you point to about this group?
An 11-1 record that has had a balanced offensive and defensive attack. There's just been nothing about this football team that you don't like. And people that I haven't seen or talked to or heard from in years have either texted me or called me or sent me emails about how much fun this team is to watch. I don't know why you wouldn't have them in the playoff, no matter what the status is at this point, because they've done exactly what nobody thought they could do, and they've also been able to dominate the teams that they played for the most part. So I don't know what else you have to say.
Now, Don, be honest, 2/3 of those people you were happy to hear from, right?
No, there wasn't anybody I wasn't happy to hear from.
Like, wait a minute.
I don't even text that much.
No, but listen, tell me if this is almost simplifying it, Don. The thing about this Indiana team to me that is intriguing and really impressive is it's not necessarily that there's one area that they do tremendously better than any other area on the field. It's that there's not an area really where they struggle. They just seem very, very balanced in their approach in the areas in which they can beat you. Is that oversimplifying it?
No, it's not at all. I mean, I think you guys asked me, or I think maybe Jimmy was the guy that asked me about where Indiana was vulnerable, and I said the only place that their only chance of being being vulnerable at this point is if the other team is just that much better talent-wise, because they do everything well. I mean, they really do. There have been very few mistakes made by this team throughout this football season. Now, some can say, okay, well, that's because you didn't play anybody, those kinds of things, but that's not true. I mean, they've dominated teams, and I can't point to anything that would tell you that this team isn't exactly what they put on the field. They have done all the things that you would expect. They make very few mistakes.
That's the big thing. Yeah.
Yeah. There are no mistakes made. I mean, the mistakes that have been made this year were in the two games against Ohio State and Michigan, obviously the two best teams that they've played this year. But the mistakes they made against Ohio State were special teams mistakes that you just don't expect to have happen because they haven't all year long. And then the mistakes they made against Michigan in the second half, again, they put forward Michigan actually put forward the thing that you have to do against Indiana. You've got to be able to put pressure on the quarterback. And Indiana didn't let that happen nearly as significantly against Michigan as it did against Ohio State. But that's the formula now that teams are going to look at to beat Indiana. And my gut is that Curt Cignetti knows that better than anybody, and he's going to find a way to fix that to some degree. So I think that's going to be the key.
Now, Don, here's the other thing. You don't have a gut. That's the thing that's impressive. Like, you look like actually you could, like, you're like an Olympic-level golfer, but in terms of your physical conditioning, you don't have a gut. So you can't use that phrase, right? You're not allowed to, right?
No, trust me, boys. I'm not near as good a physical condition as you guys think. It's just really – I dress really well, so you can't tell.
That's not what People Magazine said, Don, okay? That's
right.
all I'm saying.
Right. Hey, Don, one of the things that I was thinking about as I was watching the game, Don Fischer is our guest, is – and I don't want to oversell this because – you're the play-by-play voice of Indiana football. It doesn't mean that you're like going around and having dinners with Curt Cignetti 3 times a week. But at the same time, you're around it, and you have touched on the fact that I know you have a great respect for him as a football coach. And it's only been a year. But I don't know that we know a lot about just Curt Cignetti in terms of just like what kind of guy he is. And I don't want to put you in the position to say, well, I don't know, Jake, because it's not like maybe you are, I don't know. But I wanted you to just kind of give our listeners a glimpse or a viewpoint of what you have been able to see of Curt Cignetti, the guy. Not necessarily the coach, but away from the confidence and the bravado, just the kind of guy that he seems to be.
He's a guy that you can talk to. He's not a guy that is aloof or anything like that. He comes to our talk shows. He talks to every fan that comes up to him. He's a social individual in that regard. He doesn't put people down. He's just a great guy. And I say that I don't know him as well as a lot of people know him, or the coaches around him know him, or the players. Obviously, I don't. I'm not around him that much. But I've been around him enough to know his personality to some degree. And I think aside from the fact that he's a little bit different in the sense of his confidence level and things like that, because he is. He just – it's not that he's cocky about it. It's just that he believes in his system. And I don't know why you wouldn't all do the same, because obviously he's proven that he can do it.
Don,
it is amazing to me.
Yeah, to me, the thing that is the most impressive about him is, there are certain coaches that come in. Joe Tiller comes to mind, and I loved Joe Tiller, right? When Joe Tiller got to Purdue and he did basketball on grass, it was a style and a scheme that just completely turned the league on its ear because it was so different, right? To me, with Curt Cignetti, it's not even necessarily that he's bringing in schematically something that is so groundbreaking as much as just discipline-wise and getting every single player on the roster to understand exactly what they need to do and being completely at ease with doing that in the betterment of the team. And I know that sounds like I'm overstating it, but to me, that's what I've been able to observe. Am I missing something in terms of him being this Einstein from an X's and O's standpoint versus strictly a discipline standpoint?
No, I think the key here, Jake, is about Curt Cignetti. When he goes into the portal, when he goes to a high school to recruit a kid, he looks for character. first. That's the first thing he looks at. Talent-wise, those kinds of things come after character. He wants guys that he knows he can coach. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And, and a lot of guys say that, Don. I mean, every program says that, right? Well, we care about character.
Yeah, well, we had one this year that said, I want to be coached hard. And he left, just so you know.
Right.
But you're right. I mean, he looks for character first, and then whether the guy looks like he can play, if he's a tough competitor, he looks for character issues in regard to the guys that he recruits. If they don't fit that mold, he does not recruit them. It's that simple.
Don, I know I'm putting cart before the horse here, but I am starting to look ahead to see where, so-called pundits have the first-round matchup being for Indiana. If it's against Ohio State, looking at what Michigan was able to do to them, and me still hanging my hat on, boy, if special teams doesn't, totally, literally drop the ball, maybe that's a different game. Is that too simplistic for me to feel better about a neutral, or I guess it wouldn't be a neutral site, but a first-round matchup against Ohio State, if that's the case, given, despite the margin of victory, if special teams plays better, I think that's a different game.
Yeah, and I do think it would have been a different game as well because, look, that game was destined to be tied at 7-7 at halftime if we don't fumble the punt snap. And then in the second half, again, our punter, and I don't want to put aspersions on James Evans because he's had a terrific career at Indiana, but James Evans kicked it to the right side of the field, and they were set up to kick it to the left side of the field. And those kinds of mistakes are critical against a really good football team, which obviously Ohio State is, even though they lost to Michigan in this last matchup. But right now, if Indiana would play Ohio State again, I think it would be a much different football game. I'm not saying Indiana would win it. I'm just simply saying it would be a different football game because one thing, if it's on a neutral site, Indiana is not going to have that issue with the crowd because they certainly had that issue with the crowd at Ohio State. You couldn't hear yourself thinking in that building every time Indiana had the football. And it was tough for them, and they went to a silent count. They hadn't done that any time this year, and I think that was a factor as well. So I think things would change if Indiana plays them again. To what degree, I can't tell you that.
Don, I just know this. It is wonderful after 12 games to be able to remember the specifics of the Indiana football mistakes because there were so few of them. Because there have been years where you got a lifetime of them by September 15th. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. I can't remember any of the mistakes because there were so many of them over the years.
That's right. Well, Don, we will wait and see where Indiana gets slotted. I think it is a certainty. It's going to be in the college football playoff, and you will be able to call a playoff game, and according to Tim Brando, he said he guaranteed that Curt Cignetti would win a playoff game this year as well. So we'll see what happens with the Hoosiers, but it's been fun, and appreciate you joining us each and every week for all 12 of these games to talk about them after the fact, and hope you had a great Thanksgiving. We'll talk to you soon, all right?
I had a great Thanksgiving, no question. I hope you guys did too, and don't forget we got a basketball season. I know a lot of people have.
Well, here's the thing, Don, I'm glad you mentioned that. I wasn't going to bring up basketball, not because of the fact that they, had some disappointments in the Bahamas, but because you weren't on the mic. So, I know you were busy with the football side of things, and you weren't calling those games. So we'll get back into that next time we chat in terms of the basketball standpoint.
Yeah, all the screens on my TV are now broken because I threw stuff at them during that basketball tournament.
and that was just the Louisville game. Then you had Gonzaga to follow up. The new one got broken too. Right?
Yeah, and trust me, I didn't break them all the first game, but I did the second game.
Yeah, that's right. All right, Don, I appreciate the time.
See you guys.
All right, Don Fischer, the voice of the Hoosiers.
Yeah,
and again,
yeah, good on you. Why ruin a good day? Why,
that's right.
Why
well, honestly, we could have talked basketball for sure, but
sure.
he wasn't on the mic for it, so I just didn't think it was fair.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You want the bird's eye view. You want firsthand account. He wasn't there. I get it.
Okay, speaking of mics, I want to know if there is a guy that has worn out his welcome with his. Jimmy, I think, disagrees with me, but I'll let you know what I'm talking about next. Okay, so allow me to ask this question for you, Jimmy.
Okay.
Sometimes I speak things into existence. Sometimes I'm just ahead of the curve.
It's an uncanny power of yours, sure.
Sometimes I'm just completely off on stuff, right?
Rare occasions. Very rare, I'd say.
I brought this up earlier, and I want to revisit it. And then Mike Chappell going to join us about 10 minutes from now. We'll get back into the Colts conversation. As I was watching the Michigan-Ohio State game, a couple of years ago, very early on in his tenure, Gus Johnson, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form disputing the talent or the things about Gus Johnson that I know that people have enjoyed that make him unique. I mean, when you're a broadcaster, when you do things that, I mean, there are a lot of fish in the sea. As I've gotten older, I've gotten away from, and I understand it and respect it, but there are some broadcasters that, I'm not saying this is the case, but it is I get the perception that they feel like people are watching the game to watch them instead of the game. And there's a balance there for sure. But when you start getting praised for being unique and then harping too much on what it is that makes you unique, then all of a sudden the pendulum swings the other way where you become kind of a caricature and you're chasing what people think you are as opposed to who you authentically are. And to me, Gus Johnson kind of feels that way. Now, the first time that I saw him or was aware of him, he was doing NCAA tournament games. I remember him doing an Ohio State game, I think against Dayton, and somebody hit a big shot. And his enthusiasm was very impressive. But then I realized, I'm like, wait a minute. This guy's doing this when somebody scores a basket that makes it 8-4 in the first 5 minutes of a game. And I think that you have to sell a great moment because of the differential by which you are calling said great moment. But then you can also even go over the top on that. For example, this moment in the Ohio State-Michigan game where Michigan is driving late with a chance to go up a score, and everybody knows what happened with the interception. And then Gus Johnson suddenly, I think what I said was Daffy Duck, and somebody else said it sounded like Sylvester the Cat choking. Here's Gus Johnson's call from this Saturday on Fox.
Warren looking, and it's intercepted at the goal line. Unbelievable. Wow, Jack Sawyer, the hero, Captain Jack.
Here's my thing. I mean, he's not responsible for his voice going out, don't get me wrong. But he doesn't really tell you what's happening. I mean, if you're in the other room or something that's on in the background, I know it's television, so it's not radio, but well, did he return it? How far did he take? I don't know. It was way over the top to me. And then, afterwards, the line at the end of the game of Michigan wins, but they didn't cheat this time.
Wild line.
I mean, that's wait, what? He also, there was one player that, and I don't know the specifics on this, but there was one player who's had a family member or someone close to them that had just been killed in a drive-by shooting, and he said, what a great story. What a great story this is. This young man lost a loved one, and now here he is playing in the game. I mean, that's probably the wrong terminology there, right? People pointed out that past things that he had pointed out about Ohio State that were of question just in his delivery itself. But it seemed to me, as somebody who had Gus Johnson fatigue 5 years ago, it's difficult to overcome broadcaster fatigue as a broadcaster. And it seemed to me that Saturday was the first time that I started seeing the majority of comments about him being that of being fatigued by him, as opposed to people talking about how great he is.
Most of the ones that I saw on Saturday were in reference to the Connor Stallion comment. It's basically what he was alluding to for those that, have been under a rock the last year and a half when he said Michigan didn't have to cheat. I feel like that was a totally outlandish way to end a broadcast or have your final call. And then him defending Ohio State, basically putting the blame on Michigan for starting that brawl by planting the flag at midfield. Look, if you don't want that to happen, don't let him beat you in your house. It's no excuse for violence to happen. And he said that multiple times, and I had a massive problem with that. And the Stallions call. The voice cracking and the over-the-top call on the interception. I've never sat here and said Gus Johnson's like the greatest broadcaster of all time, but he's a staple of my childhood and people my age because of that, because of being over the top and because of just being
he's probably
crazy
somewhat your Dick Vitale, right?
Sure, he's in like. Look, I like Mike Tirico and Jim Nantz and Joe Buck more than I do Gus. If you're asking me who do I want in a big game, but when I see Johnson, I think people in my age group and my demographic aren't repulsed by him.
I think.
Like, I enjoy a Gus call because I'm going to get moments that are going to make me laugh like that because it's so over the top and ridiculous on the interception.
This is probably overly nuanced, and maybe it's esoteric to the broadcast industry itself. But to me, more often than not, it seems like there are moments in games where he is not prepared, where he is unaware of a storyline or a factoid about a player or points out something that's like kind of common knowledge. And to him, it's like he wasn't there for the meeting about it. Maybe that's just me.
I mean, it's possible, but again, Fox is yet to punish him. They still trade him around there as their number one voice, and until they make a change there.
It is interesting, though, that he was originally hired, if I'm not mistaken, not originally hired to do, but he was initially at one time going to be, and imagine this, he was going to be Fox's voice of soccer. Do you remember that?
Vaguely.
I do
remember that.
And I don't remember if they backed out of that contract or if they just it kind of softly went away. But I don't know. To me, it's just interesting because he is. I have always said that like loud, shtick-based broadcasting has its place, but it also has a shorter shelf life, and it seems to me like the end of that shelf life in terms of people's patience is closer than it felt like it was 2 or 3 years ago. I'm not rooting for it, I'm just saying.
I think he's perfected that lane, though. I think that when you think of that shtick, whether you like it or not, that's Gus Johnson, and people that try to imitate that, you can't do it because it's Gus Johnson.
But I just think what I'm saying is I think there are more people today that when they are watching a game go, it's like that your father, not your father's root beer. When you reach the point where you've had enough of it, people are like, okay, enough. And it just seems to me like that there are more people feeling that way than there's less pushback on me now when I kind of roll my eyes about Gus Johnson than there was 5 years ago. That simply would be my point. Mike Chappell, by the way, Colts a big win yesterday. Mike Chappell, the dean of Colts writers, is going to join us next. It is a Monday after a Colts game. That means that Mike Chappell, who is the dean of writers, as a matter of fact, Mike Chappell is the namesake now of the media room at the Colts complex over on West 56th Street, joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Mike, I'm going to begin with this, and maybe this is a belabored point or a moot one at this juncture. But now that we have seen a couple of examples late in games of Anthony Richardson, in fact, showing a maturity about him, do you believe that, A, the Colts benching him and then bringing him back was a stroke of master genius that has facilitated this, or B, that they actually went to Joe Flacco because they were wanting to really send a message and then realized that Joe Flacco was not going to be as competitive as they desired, and they thought, you know what, if we're going to have a non-competitive quarterback, we might as well have the one that can learn on the job, and they put Richardson back in, and voila, this has all come about. Which is closer to the truth?
Well, probably one, because I don't think they ever made that move with the idea that Flacco would finish the season.
Okay.
I mean, they absolutely had to go back to Richardson at some point. I mean, regardless of how Flacco played, he's not possibly the future, even, a one-year future next year. They absolutely had to know what they had with Richardson to either, hey, he's the guy, or holy crap, here we go again with trying to find our guy. But I do think, and they don't get it. Shane Steichen hasn't gotten into specifics. He's given you some indications that Richardson just didn't realize what it took, which I think it's kind of strange that he didn't, but that he didn't understand fully what it took to be that guy. What it took day to day. Yeah, you get your free time to some extent, but your free time is not the same as the center or the wide receiver or the safety. It's just not. So I think it was to, send a message, but at the same time, the message was, this is what you have to do. Not like 3 times a year, but or during the season, but all season. And yeah, you get a little bit of a break when the season's over, but this is your job now, and your success dictates everyone else's success more than any other position. So I think it was sending a message that he wasn't doing whatever the level was that he needed to do. Taking notes, paying attention, asking questions. I don't know. I don't know that we're ever going to get that. But it appears that the light's gone on. You hope. As important as these games are to win and lose, and it's a bottom line business, it's really more important for the Colts to get enough evidence to make that decision at the end of the year that, yes, we can build around this guy. He started, 13 games. He's 22. So there's going to be, those what the heck was that moments. There still are, but I think it's your number one scenario, because I don't think Flacco was ever going to start more than a handful of games, because you had, unless he's throwing for 350 and 3 touchdowns,
right?
But you had to get Richardson back in there.
Mike, to me, concern is the wrong word, but I was thinking about this yesterday as I was watching late in the game. For example, when they had to go for 2, and they said, you know what, the hell with it. We're just going to keep the ball in this guy's hands because he's big,
right.
He's athletic. Let's just go, right? And then it dawned on me that the one area, if you wanted to be negative, I guess, the one thing that I'm curious is Anthony Richardson's athleticism and his ability to either call a play for a design run or his ability to improvise a run if a play's breaking down. Does that have potential to mask areas of deficiency that the Colts desperately need to address and give them a pass to once again not address it? And I'm talking about necessarily or specifically tight end and maybe even still receiver spot. But
I think you're talking about masking deficiencies in his game. Yeah, it does. It's
or in his game, you are correct. I mean, he's starting to show a little bit of consistency in the passing game, but eventually he's going to – I still think in the NFL you've got to be pass first and then run.
I agree. And you can't get by 50% completion. 55, 60, I don't know what the bottom number is that you can really get by with every week. It's funny. I looked because I spend more time looking at stats because I'm an idiot and I'm a nerd. But yesterday was only the 15th time since '84 that they've won a game with 12 or fewer completions and 110 or fewer yards. You know, the first time since 21. That's not how you do it. His run game is really lethal. It really is. There were a couple of plays that he made because of who he is. He outruns pursuit, or somebody's got an angle on him and on a third down, and he outruns the angle. Well, he's got to get better in the pass game. And he's never going to be 65%. I don't think. If you get 60, hallelujah, have a parade. But it's just hard to imagine. I think he's had 3 games, 3 of his 13, where he's had more than 12 completions. It makes it hard. Yet he starts the game 3 for 3 and pretty sharp, and he finishes the game. And here we go again. A.D. Mitchell drops a deep ball, and Kylan Granson dropped. Kylan Granson's was hard because he's diving. God, you see guys make these plays every game, every week. So he's not getting a lot of help. So yeah, tight ends. My goodness. Before going into the game, I went and looked at 22 players. 22 tight ends had more catches than this group had. And then you see Brock Bowers go, 14 for 140, and he's got like almost 90 catches. So yeah, that's an area they really need to fortify. And yeah, it'd be great to add a third receiver who I guess he'd be your number 4 guy, because I think Mitchell shows you a lot of good stuff. But he's just got to make plays when they're there. He's made a couple, but he's also not made a couple. They're getting all they can from Pittman. They miss downs. Holy smokes, they miss downs. And Pierce at the end of the season, we're going to say, that's a pretty good season by Alec Pierce. He's going to average, 18, 19 yards a game. I think the franchise record might be around 20. Jimmy Orr or somebody, had 19 or 20, whatever it is. But he just gives you catches. He just does. So, yeah, does he mask – most good quarterbacks mask deficiencies elsewhere. They're asking this 22-year-old kid to mask issues. I thought, and a lot of us are right about Steichen's decision to go for 2 points. And as best as I can find, it's the first time that they've done that. I think 2-pointers, somebody pointed out, 2-pointers started in 1994. First time that they've had win or else, and they've gone for it and
won. Did that tell you their belief in their offense or their hesitance in their defense?
Yes, that's where I was going. I don't think I'd want to put my defense back out there. My goodness, they got boat raced by the 31st ranked offensive team. And, that's where I was going to mention. Trust in the offense, probably, but also not trust in the defense. And why would you have the rookie quarterback really diced them up? So, it's pretty gutsy to do that. And, I don't know there would have been a lot of criticism. I really don't, had they not made it. I think a lot of people would have agreed with that. They darn near lost in regulation when Sly misses a 68-yarder. I thought he hit it. Boy, from the back angle.
Me too.
It was
Chap.
It was dead solid.
Listen, that guy. I mean, if you're any player on that field on either side, you at least walk up to him and tap him on the helmet. Go, that was a hell of an effort there, right?
I know. And if it's 63 yards, it's probably good. Maybe it hits the crossbar. Kudos to Steichen. They had to win that. And the game that matters is the 15th when they come out of the bye. If they don't beat Denver, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. I don't think the Broncos are going to fade. They've got to lose another game, but you've got to get the tie break with the Broncos, and then the rest of the schedule is really, really conducive to running the table. But it only matters. I thought they could get in 4-1, but one of the 4 had to be Denver.
The Dean Mike Chappell of Fox 9 and CBS 4 is our guest. He joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Chap, by the way, I think I can say this as president of Query & Company. We are a stat safe haven, so you're welcome to throw stats anytime you'd
That's
like.
right.
I implore
Well, what I do,
By the way,
you do the research. You do the research, and if somebody corrects you, fine. Okay, that's fine. But when it's the first time, that they've done it, it's kind of cool.
And by the way, with Alec Pierce, when you were talking about average, you meant per catch. He
Right.
He could go right now. I think he's at 22 yards per catch. And what'd you say? About 20 is the record, somewhere in there.
Yeah, when we're feeling here, I'll look real quick. But I think Jimmy Orr might have had 19 or 20 in a season, and that's back when Unitas was really winging it to his guys. So yeah, and again, I think at the end of the season, we had questions with Alec Pierce. Boy, how is he going to react to A.D. Mitchell coming in? Well, he pretty damn well, really, and he's kind of held up pretty well. So, but
Chap, another one I want to throw at you. The 19-play game-winning drive is the longest game-winning drive since at least 2001 in terms of plays called. And I know that's all situational, but we talked about it early on in the show. That's what this season was about, real-world experience for Anthony Richardson, seeing if he has the capability to lead a game-winning drive like that, to overcome adversity, the pick that he threw, a drive earlier. For you on that game-winning drive, at what point did you feel like he had full command? Where did that drive turn for you? And how do you learn from that moving forward? How do you build off of it?
Well, three fourth down conversions. The one to Mo was monster because some guy got in free and flushed flushed Richardson to the right. And I think Mo said after the game that he wasn't the guy until he was the guy because he was open. That was pretty crucial, and it was such a seasonal drive, and including the two drops, for crying out loud, and to convert the touchdown to Pierce to tie it, or to bring within one was fourth and goal. So that's why it's kind of crazy, and we wrote about this during training camp, how when the game speeds up in those moments, Richardson really plays well. And you can't do that. You can't be out there going full bore all the time because it's just sometimes you fail and then your defense is back out there. But we saw in camp when they, sometimes they run these 11-on-11s and not so much. And then they run 2-minute or red zones, and he was pretty good. So that's really encouraging. I sort of felt they were going to finish it like that because, again, when they had to make plays, they did. They kept the running game going. I think Taylor was that drive. They had like the first 6 or 7 plays were runs to Taylor. So in the completions, the conversions on a couple of passes, they were right there. Mo didn't have to make a great catch, and it was a great throw to Pierce because he was covered. Had a guy tailing him, so very impressive. But again, then do it again in Denver against a much better defense, and that's what it's all about. Is when you have a bad game, make it be a game that's not awful where you can't win. Just be in a game where you're almost like yesterday. 12-24, 2 interceptions, which were bad, and he explained the one where the defensive end dropped and sort of surprised them. But you get the 2 touchdowns. That needs to be your bad game. That needs to be the floor. And then we've seen some stretches where he can have much, much better success. But 2 game-winning drives in the last 3 weeks is pretty impressive considering, again, Danny Penner, first game of the year. Mark Lewinsky, first game of the year. And you put Gonzalez at right tackle for the first time this year as a starter. So that's pretty impressive. The deficiencies are there. We've talked about them. So I think the coaching staff, by and large, deserves – I think the coaching staff has outcoached the talent, if that makes any sense. But they're 6-7. They've overcome some things, and it's still sort of right there for them if they take care of Denver.
By the way, Corbin has pointed out that the Colts yards per reception record is Roger Carr in 1976 at 25.9.
Like 20, I just looked at 25 yards. Holy smokes!
Yeah, that's impressive. Hey, Ashton Doolin's on pace right now. He's only got 2 catches though. There obviously is a minimum that has to go into that.
Minimum.
That's right.
10 catches or whatever.
Hey, Chap, is now that Eberflus is back on the waiver wire, the Colts went back to Glowinski and it worked out for him. Is Eberflus a guy that could be a candidate next year if they decide to make a change at defensive coordinator?
Oh, maybe. I don't know, because and then people bitched at Eberflus's defense.
Yep.
So I maybe I'm thinking they go somewhere else because.
Do you think Gus Bradley's seat is warm?
Probably. Oh, yeah. Yes, probably. And there have been games that. As mediocre and bad as they've played, they've kept. I go back to Green Bay. As bad as they were, it was 16-10. As bad as it was, they've got 4th and 2 against Minnesota with 5 minutes to play to win it. So, but that's not the mark of a good defense as well. We kept it winnable, but no, go out and win games, close games. Yeah, we'll see. I really like Gus, so I try to stay away from hey, get rid of Gus. And I know people that are banging the drum for that, but there probably will be changes at the end of the season.
Mike Chappell's our guest. He's on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Chap, I want to go back to Danny Pinter, who I thought played really well yesterday at the center position. He has played in that spot. That's right. The former Ball State Cardinal. He's played in that spot before. He is kind of a Swiss Army knife. I mentioned Charles Johnson earlier, which is going on the way back. Guys you can plug in different positions. Let's just say if you're going too far, Joe Wright's another one. If we're going into next season, I think Bortolini has shown that he can really slide in if you decide not to bring back Ryan Kelly. Has Pinter made that an interesting case now, or is Pinter one that you look at his versatility and you don't make him a design starter anywhere because you want to use him as a spot starter elsewhere?
Oh, I think at best he's your backup center. Swiss Army knife might be a bit strong for him because they tried him to be the right guard a couple of years ago. Remember when he started the first couple of games and it just didn't work?
Yeah.
I think center's his position. He's played well there. I think they were 3-0 that one year when Ryan Kelly had a concussion and his family issues. But no, Bortolini's he's the future, and I don't think they bring Kelly back. I don't think if that was the plan, they probably would have extended him with everybody else this past year. He wasn't really happy about that they did not. He wants to continue to play. But no, I think this is probably it for Ryan. Although I'd love to have him back because he has a great voice in the locker room, and he's been playing at a decent level. But you drafted Bortolini for a reason. You drafted Gonzalez for a reason. Maybe he's your long-term right tackle with Braden Smith's getting a little older and he's got another year I think in his contract. So this was a case of drafting more for the future, but knowing you may need him this year. So I think Pinter's more of a backup moving forward.
Mike Chappell of Fox 9 and CBS 4 joined us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Chap, I know Jake already asked you about the issues on defense basically being are what they are at this point. The drops across the board, and you highlighted already Josh Downs' absence was felt massively throughout that game. But the drops, be it in the tight end room, be it basically throw a dart at the wide receiver room and you could find somebody outside of maybe Michael Pittman Jr. that's had bad drops this year. Are what they are at this point, or is there still a level of that is fixable for the stretch run?
I mean, by this point, you are what you are. It's not like you've got a guy coming off IR that's missed the first 10 games or the last 10 games with an injury and he's going to come back. And I think maybe getting Kelly back, and there's a chance, Sykin said today, that there's, I don't know if he said a good chance or there's a chance that Kelly is designated to return when they start practice on Monday or Wednesday, whatever it is next week. Now, whether he would play right away, I don't know. They'll have to see how Pinter played, and I would think Bortolini's out of concussion protocol by the Denver game. No, this is who you are. That's the problem. You want more. You need more from the tight ends. And Will Mallory makes a catch yesterday. You think, where's he been? And it's not like he's the answer at the position, but he could maybe give you more than everybody else is giving. I'm sure he's not a good blocker, but pretty good. Pretty good ball catcher. And if the other guys aren't working, then try something else. But by and large, that's the kind of moves you can make now. You put Will Mallory out there, but getting Josh Downs back, it just makes a difference, because then that puts A.D. Mitchell back as your fourth guy, and instead of being on the field for 35 snaps or whatever, he's on the field for 15. And Josh Downs is going to be that guy. Doggone, he's that guy then when it's 3rd and 6. You better know where he's at defensively, because that's just an easy pitch and catch with those guys. So that's where they're going to get better, is getting a few guys back. I guess we didn't have Steichen today. There's a chance they get Juju Brents back, but then he's not played hardly this year. And then you're throwing somebody out there that's not done much. So no, right now this is who you are, and the only thing that's going to change is maybe losing somebody with injury. I just don't see, other than getting Glowinski off the street, which was, a stroke of luck for them, I guess. There's just not a whole lot you can do.
The Colts will next be in Denver for a big one. We'll find out tonight just how significant that is in the standings.
True.
Broncos and Browns tonight. It's going to be a big one either way. And then between now and then, though, it is Brigham Young East on the schedule, which also means bye for the Colts. That means a bye week for Mike Chappell as well, who is inevitably probably either on his way to Hawaii or on his way to a dinner with Bill Benner. It's one of the two. But, Chap, we appreciate it. Enjoy the week off of non-coverage, and we'll talk to you soon, all right?
You guys be well. Talk to you next week.
All right, Mike Chappell again from the Express Pro Tire or on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line, CBS 4 and WXIN Fox 59, where you can see and read his work. Purdue over the weekend making a change at their football program. Ryan Walters is out. That we know. Where do they turn? What do they do? And when was the decision made? Brian Newbert, Gold and Black, discusses that next. Through the 2 o'clock hour in Indianapolis. For that matter, it's halfway past the 2 o'clock hour or through the 2 o'clock hour everywhere in the Eastern time zone. My name is Jake Query. Jimmy Cook, the other voice you hear on this program. It's the always creatively named Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Where else
Purdue,
do you think we blew the budget there?
What's that?
Where do we blow the budget that we didn't?
You know what they did? Same thing that IU did. $75,000 they paid a market research company to come in and then make one tweak to the U in the logo. Purdue paid $9.4 million to make a tweak to their football program because Ryan Walters is out. He gets a buyout now, and the Boilermakers and Mike Babinski, the athletic director, are on the prowl for a new leader of the Boilermaker football program. Joining us now on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line from goldenblack.com is Brian Newbert, friend of the show, who covered the Boilers on the basketball side of things out in San Diego. We'll get to that as well. But, Brian, I want to begin with this. By all account, it appears as though even though the bucket game was ugly, that was not the nail in the coffin for Ryan Walters because his fate had been sealed, it appears, going into that game. Do you believe that that's accurate and that this is something that they knew going into it they were going to end up doing?
Yeah, first of all, let me credit you on the intro music there, playing the greatest breakup song in the history of rock and roll. Right before talking about coach getting fired is pretty clever.
Corbin gets all the credit in the world for that, yes.
If you saw Ryan Walters' post-game press conference after Michigan State, he got very emotional, and there was obviously something more going on there than just a team had just lost a close game or a winnable game. I think this has been going on for weeks. I think that they were working on parallel projects here in terms of, they're laying the groundwork for a search should it come to that, but also if they did anything here the last couple weeks of the season positive, they might have considered keeping Ryan Walters around, but building a new kind of infrastructure around him, hiring a new staff, things like that. I think it was a no-brainer. I think, even before the Indiana game, this was pretty evident. This season was just such an abject failure that, Purdue has probably had a pretty good idea what it was going to do for quite some time. Now, that said, you have to keep the team engaged. You have to keep the staff there engaged. So there might have been some I don't want to say smoke screens, but there might have been some reasons put out there for them to continue doing their jobs, obviously, and that would be to dispel the notion that Purdue's mind was made up here. But I do think Purdue's mind was made up here. I think the 66-7 loss to Notre Dame, followed up by the non-competitiveness of the Oregon game way back when, I think probably got Purdue thinking long and hard about this. And I think as the season went on and just nothing positive happened, it was pretty evident that Purdue had to do something here. And I don't think the Indiana game necessarily was the final nail in the proverbial coffin, but it took all options off the table for certain.
Brian, to me, it is imperative for Purdue that they now go out and find themselves an established head coach. I hate to use Indiana as the barometer here because of the rivalry. I get it. But if you look at Indiana, they went out, and Curt Cignetti was a guy that really wasn't on the radar for a lot of Indiana fans when that job came open. But he had history of winning at smaller schools, but of winning, right? And to me, and I understand the chic nature of the rising young coordinator, but I feel like Purdue needs to go out now and say, we've got to get a guy that has history running a program, regardless of the level. Do you think Mike Babinski agrees with that?
I think that, Purdue's lack of experience on its coaching staff really did show up. It was part of the problem. Whether you need to now overcorrect and make sure that's part of the solution, I think there's a lot of different ways to do it. I mean, people talk about hiring assistant coaches as inherently being a flawed strategy, but Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, very different animals from Purdue football, don't get me wrong, but it can work if you get the right guy, and Purdue just didn't get the right guy. That's what became crystal clear. here these last couple months. Now, I would expect Purdue to have experience at the top of its list here. Mike Kaminsky obviously just talked to us and isn't going to put any sort of parameters on it and say we're absolutely positively looking for this, or this. But I think it stands to reason that in the desire to hit the ground running here, but also appease your fan base, which was a big part of his message today and his comments to us, I would think somebody with that track record of winning and some experience and some of the wisdom that Ryan Walters just didn't have to get through some of the difficulties he faced these last 2 years, I think that's going to be an important part of the calculus. So, yes, I don't think Purdue is necessarily locking itself into a specific set of boxes to check, but I have to think experience and an offensive background to a certain extent are probably going to be pretty high on their list of things they're going to look pretty closely at. On top of just being able to bring a staff with you, but also nowadays bringing players with you. That was a big part of what made Kurt Cignetti so successful this year, too. Just the continuity going from one school to the other. I think that's going to be a really important thing Purdue's going to look at pretty close here, too, as they look for their next guy.
Brian Newbert is our guest. He joined us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Brian, have you allowed yourself to create ideal scenarios, dream scenarios, a short list of names that you want to have as the next head coach at Purdue?
Well,
have you gotten there yet in terms of outlining it?
I think that trying to think off the top of my head.
I see guys for example, like I see everybody from, like Jake mentioned, experienced coaches to, up and coming coordinators to, like, I've seen Chip Kelly and Rich Rod's name thrown out there, like just established names of name recognition. Yeah, that's a college coach. Sure. What is it about? What's the level of attractiveness about being able to operate with Purdue football basically at a blank slate? Like, why would somebody want to take up that mantle? What's the selling point?
Well, the Big Ten is still a pretty good deal. I mean, there's only 20-some of these jobs between the two power conferences available. Purdue paid Ryan Walters $4 million a year. Purdue does have a track record of success before these last 2 years. They got a pretty good facility. They've got really good facilities outside of their stadium. It is a good job in the sense that all these power conference jobs are good jobs. It's not the best of the good jobs, but it's still a Big Ten job. I would think that it would be pretty attractive to a lot of established head coaches, if for no other reason want that last payday or that big payday. There is playoff access at Purdue. That's kind of a theoretical consideration at this point, even though Indiana obviously just showed that it can be much more than theory, that anything's possible. But comparing their situation to Purdue's right now is kind of tough business. I think Purdue's going to look for experience. I think just having what we just talked about in terms of the ability to navigate difficult situations is part of it. But if you're looking at like older, much more established coaches, I think you also have to take into account the fact that the game is completely different now than it was 5 years ago. This is going to be the weirdest couple years, probably in the history of college football. And the last couple of years in college football have been really weird. The revenue sharing thing, coming into play here is going to fundamentally change the game to the point where you're going to have these organizations that require coaching, but also almost NFL-style general manager sort of roles to manage the money, the quote-unquote de facto salary, things like that. So how this next hire is able to navigate the portal, navigate revenue sharing, things like that is going to be really, really important. That's where I think Purdue might have misread Ryan Walters a little bit. I think they looked at him like he was going to be a really modern, new age kind of coach as the game was getting very, very different. He was going to be savvy in the portal. He was going to be good with NIL, stuff like that, even though Purdue obviously doesn't have the war chest in NIL that a lot of other people have. but you should judge coaches on how they use their NIL money and not how much they have. And the transfer portal was a disaster for Purdue these last 2 years. And just the next guy's ability to navigate the whole changing landscape of a job that is just fundamentally different, I think has to be a big part of the calculus here too. Who that's going to be, because there's so few coaches who've already had a chance to show they can navigate that stuff. That kind of remains to be seen. But in terms of names, I think it's pretty early in the process here. It's very possible Purdue's got their guys ID'd by now. There's conference championship games going on here this coming weekend and things like that. So maybe some stuff will come to the surface after this weekend. We kind of know who Purdue looked at last time, things like that. But circling back to those guys, I'm not necessarily sure is the way they're going to go. So I think it's kind of a blank slate that very well, for all we know, might be completed behind the scenes, and we just don't know it yet.
Brian, speaking of experience, which Purdue, you said, I think we can assume is going to look for in terms of their head coach from the football side of things. Their basketball team got some of that. You were there in San Diego. Once again, Matt Painter goes in, finds a tournament to get his team ready for conference play. And it looked to me like in that Purdue is finding its roles now, notably Miles Colvin, a guy that I think is going to be able to give them good quality minutes in complementary areas. Your assessment on what you were able to see from Purdue, especially with that Ole Miss game.
Yeah, I think that. And hey, first off, I should apologize for this cough. I'm trying to fight back here. If I sound like I have a toad in my throat.
Well, you've been in San Diego. The weather's terrible out there, Brian. You're excused, right?
Yeah, I'm the only guy who goes to California and comes back coughing. I just think Purdue, its experience is showing up. I think with its 3 really good players coming back, its 3 borderline great players coming back, one of the best cores in college basketball. I think their experience, their leadership is showing up. Trey Kaufman-Moran's gone to a whole other level, as some of us expected. That's been a really big deal. I think Miles Colvin and Camden Heide have transformed into not just athletes and versatile players like they were last year, but into really, really winning guys, really, really high-energy guys whose athleticism is being unlocked by their effort and their energy. What Miles Colvin's done here this season has been the story of the season. He has gone from being the YouTube highlight guy, shooting threes and dunking and all that stuff, and doing stuff that looks good but doesn't necessarily win games for you, to being the guy who does both the stuff that looks good but also the stuff that wins games for you. And to be brutally honest with you, I never saw that coming. I didn't know he had it in him. As a guy who's watched him play for 3-4 years now, he deserves all the credit in the world for really, really growing up as a competitor, really growing up as a basketball player, really growing up as a person and understanding what it takes to win at this level and doing what he needs to do. But I think Purdue's effort is what's really standing out here. They are playing really hard. And this is a program that has always prided itself on that has had such supreme skill the last few years, that it has had guys who've played really hard. Zach Edey was relentless. Mason Gillis was relentless. But right now you are seeing a team that is just giving great effort, giving great energy, and doing a lot of little things really, really well. And that's kind of the sign of a great culture. That's kind of the sign of a great program. And it has certainly been carried on from last year's team to this year's team. Purdue will want it to go from this year's team to next year's team, and continue on into perpetuity. I think the effort is what's standing out most right now.
Brian, short notice for us to grab a hold of you with the news from Purdue over the weekend, and then of course I know you're coming back from California as well. Appreciate you joining us. Hope you feel better, and look forward to talking to you again.
No problem, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, Brian Newbert on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. Jimmy, you got plays of the day?
I do indeed.
All right, we'll do them next.
Couple plays in both the NBA and Monday Night Football tonight in the NFL, but first in the association. The Brooklyn Nets are 8-point underdogs on the road against the Chicago Bulls. I will scoop the 8 there for the Brooklyn Nets, getting 8 tonight in Chicago. Monday Night Football, it's the Browns at the Broncos. I'll take Denver Broncos wide receiver Courtland Sutton as an anytime touchdown scorer. I will also lay the 6.5 on the Broncos as 6.5-point favorites tonight against the Cleveland Browns. So scooping the 8 on the Nets, lay the 6.5 on the Broncos, and give me Courtland Sutton of Denver as an anytime touchdown scorer. Corbin, generally, you don't have plays, no plays today. I would assume, okay, that is correct. You're a smart man. Those are the plays of the day. Shockingly unsponsored, by the way.
That's right. Still your chance to get involved with the program. Right?
Of course.
By the way, I don't know how to answer this, and I'll give Josh credit. Sometimes people ask me a question, and I'm like, I don't know how to answer that.
How do you look so good in the morning?
That's also a great question.
Yeah.
I do look okay, though, right? For 52 years old, I think I do okay, right?
Corbin, what do you think?
Corbin saw me at my coldest on, was that Friday night?
Yeah, I thought you were a caroler that was coming in to sing me a Christmas song during the Pacers
I had on my
game.
Christmas coat.
Yeah.
That was my
Did he have on a top hat?
Yeah.
No,
he had a flat cap.
Okay.
I did. And I had on my Paddington Bear red wooden, I don't know how to explain it, but it's a Christmas-looking coat, right? That's the coat I was wearing when I spent 41 hours in the Marion County lockup many years ago. So the best part about it is it has a huge hood, which I was able to cover myself with when people were trying to ask me what I was in there for.
I saw it was like a movie, overhang that shows you the films that are out, and stacked on top of one another was Gladiator 2, Paddington 3, and it said, man, what a great road to win for the Bear. It was awesome.
That is solid. No, Josh, on the X Twitter post, this is Josh Shee 13005421, who I'm fairly certain is a real person. Says, Jake, why do you ask so many questions and make 10-minute analogies? It disrupts the flow of the show. I don't know how to answer that because I'm one half of the flow of the show, and then it's tough to do interviews without asking so many questions.
I think the only way to answer it would be with an analogy. I feel like that's the only way you could really dismount there.
The 10-minute analogy, I get it, except for that there are times, it's a fair critique, except for that, oftentimes I look up and I'm like, well, we have 27 minutes to fill, right? But I try to be conversational about it. But it's hard to answer why, when part of my job is professionally to interview people, why I'm asking so many questions.
That one's tough.
It's kind of like asking a masonry guy, like, why do you pick up so many bricks? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, what do you say to that?
Somebody that's still repairing shoes. Man, why do you keep doing that?
Right.
Why do you keep repairing all those shoes? I don't know. It's my job.
I know you're a teacher, but why are you constantly giving lessons? I don't know. Other than that, it's a fair question from Josh, who then I scrolled through his timeline, and I noticed that Josh, all of his tweets are to either myself or JMV, but yet he then told me that nobody cares about sports. And I'm like, but all your tweets are to me and JMV. Josh Shee 13005421.
Is he a big douchebag?
It would appear.
Hey, you big douchebag.
John has walked in. What's that?
Did he send crap to me or you or who?
No, he hasn't. He sent something to you yesterday, I think.
Hey, he
wants to know why I ask so many questions when I do interviews.
Oh, because you kind of have to. That's the point.
Right.
Hey, I went to Bloomington on Saturday. I did not make it to the game, however.
Really?
We were close to going, and then
got stuck where?
Crazy Horse for the most
that's a
part,
good
which
place.
I freaking love. The Crazy Horse.
Did they? Dave First and I one time went down to cover an IU game, and we're like, let's go to Crazy Horse. It's Tuxedo Tuesdays, and we went there, and the Tuxedo Tuesday, the girl was like, we haven't done that in 15 years, and Dave and I are like, maybe we're old.
I once upon a time in the 90s, I spent a night at the Crazy Horse drinking with a friend of mine, John McHugh, who used to be
know John McHugh.
Downtown Johnny on
for
TTS.
IndyCar stuff. We had a great time together.
Former IU coach of the women, Jim Izzard.
Oh, yeah.
If you remember that name. And the dude that jumped at the Pink Floyd concert from the second deck of the Hoosier Dome and landed on a bunch of people and about killed them.
Yep.
So, yeah, when he was all high. So he thought people below him it was like waters and waves.
Now, just out of curiosity, the guy that jumped at the RCA Dome, and I remember that well during Pink Floyd, was anybody hurt that he landed on?
No, he hurt people below him. And I think they tried to sue Bob and Tom because Bob and Tom used him as a punchline every day. So They were not happy.
All right, what you got lined up on the big program,
Well, we're
John?
going to talk about the Colts with
Corbin's
the
over
win
here doing
yesterday.
helicopters at us.
What's that?
Corbin's doing helicopters at us.
Oh, there he is yesterday. He had fun yesterday. Yeah, ask Corbin about yesterday. It was a blast in here. So, like it always is. No, we'll do some Colts, some IU, Pacers, all that crap. So,
All
coming
right,
up here.
you just thawed out from Bloomington, so that's good. J&V is up next. We will be back with you at noon tomorrow. I want to thank everybody for listening to Query & Company.